This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone, good morning friends. We're continuing in Mishna Berura Daf Hashavua. Thanks for joining. We're learning Siman Ayin Gimel. Siman Ayin Gimel. Hayashen im Ishtoi uvanav ech yisnaig. One who sleeps together with his wife and children, how should he conduct himself regarding Kriya Shema? Says Mechaber, Shnayim shahayu yishenim betalis. Two who are sleeping under one cloak, betalis echad, uvasar shneim noigim zebazeh, and their flesh is touching. Lo yikra Kriya Shema. They should not read the Shema. Elam kein hoisa talis mafsekes beineim, unless there is some kind of garment set or a cover separating between them. Mimasneim ulamata, from their waist and down. It's talking about back in the day, people would sleep unclothed under a cover. So if two people were sleeping and their bodies were touching each other, they can't say Shema until there's some kind of talis separating between them from their loins and down. Says in Mishna Berura, nakat noigim. Why does it have to be touching? Mishum da'az also likrois b'lei hafsakas talis. Then it would be prohibited to read without an interruption of a talis. Afilu im yirtzu lahachzer pneim mizelazah. Even if they would want to turn from each other and face opposite directions. So the reason why why did the Mechaber say they're touching each other? Because since he said they have to have a talis separating, that would be required if they're touching each other. If they're not touching each other, then they could just turn around. One will face the right side, the other will face the left side. They'll be back to back, and it would not be required to have a talis mafsekes beinehem. Says the Mishna Berura, continues, if they're facing each other, then also likrois b'lei hafsakas talis. Then they cannot read they can't say Shema if there's no hefsek of a talis, afilu im eino noigim, even if they're not touching. Kol sheshaychlim b'kiruv echad lachaver, if they're lying close together. So in other words, like this: two people, they're unclothed, they're under a talis. If they're touching each other, then they have to have a hafsakas talis. And that would be required even if they're back to back. So in other words, they're not facing each other. You need to have a separation of a talis if they're touching each other. If they're not touching each other, they don't have to have a separation of a talis. But if they're face to face, even if they're not touching each other, they have to have a hafsakas talis. Lo yikra. Why? Shema yavo lidei hirher. You might come to improper thoughts. Beinehem v'az afilu pneim zelazah mutter. Then, if there's a hefsek talis beinehem, it's mutter, even if they're facing each other. Why? Deshuv la yavo lidei her. They won't come to her. Ulamata. It has to be that from their waist and down there's a hefsek talis. Avo mimasneim ulamah, from their waist and up. Afilu b'saram noigeh zebazeh. Even if their flesh is touching lo yasli deher, they're not going to come to improper thoughts. So the question is, what if their one hand is touching the flesh of another? So are you allowed to say Shema then? So the Chazon Ish says that als the dine kriya Shema, you could say Shema, but Reb Chaim Kanievsky says you're noigeya b'makom hamachusa, you're touching a typically covered part of the body, so that would be an issue. Okay, the Mishna Berura continues. Sivkatan. Okay, the Mishna Berura continues. V'da the cholzeh gamkein sheyoytzi roishoy lachutz. It has to be your head is outside of the blanket. Shelo yehei einav yuchal liros erva. Because if your own head is under the blanket and you could see your erva, then you can't say Shema. Besides that, you have to make sure there's the sheet is against your heart, meaning up against the waist, so that your heart doesn't see the erva. Shlo yehei libo royes ha'erva. Meaning, it doesn't mamish have to be on the heart, the Dirshu explains. Even, and this is the way I said it, even if it's on your waist, that would ensure that your liboy einoi royes ha'erva. We know there's a concept that the heart could see halachically. Like Shema Melch says, "V'libi ra harbe chachma vadas." So therefore, you want to make sure that your lave is not royes ha'erva. Ukil kaman bereish siman ayin daled v'ayin sham b'siv katan beis mashu kasavna oid bezeh kasav ha'pri chadash. The Pri Chadash writes, "De niralai," it would seem to him, "De im b'diavad kara b'lai hachzaras panim." B'diavad, let's say you said Shema without turning around your face, uv'lai hafsakas talis, and without a hefsik of a talis. The yatzai yidei chevasai, you're going to be yatzai. That if you didn't turn around and you didn't have a hefsik talis, it's just you facing the erva, you'll be yatzai. That's very difficult to understand why that would be. Ayin sham v'apri megadim afakbek bezeh v'chem b'sei v'shuas Yaakov ayin sham. The Pri Megadim questions whether b'diavad, in fact, you would be yatzai. Sif beis im hayu yashein imishtai. Now, Sif Aleph seems like it's talking about two people who are sleeping together, and they're not necessarily husband and wife. Maybe two brothers, maybe a father and a son. That's how the families used to sleep. That's what we're talking about over here. It seems like any gender at all, if they're facing each other without a talis, or they're facing away from each other and they're touching, there's still an issue of hirhur. Now we're going to talk about ish ve'ishtai. Siv bezim hayu yashin. Now, I would have thought maybe husband and wife is more chamor. Maybe there's one should be more stringent because maybe it will lead to relations. But we're going to see that there's a svara that it's less stringent because of ishtai kagufai. Says the Mechaber, Hayashin Mishta, someone who's sleeping with his wife, Kari b'chazaras panum l'tzaracher. He could turn the other way. Va'afilu b'loy hafsakas talis, even without an interposition of a talis. Mishum dechashiva kagufai, because a wife is like your own body. V'yesh misha oiser, there are those who prohibit. V'nacha and lachash l'dvarav, and it's correct to be choishesh for that stringent opinion. Says the Mishna Berura Katan Beis, Imishte, Mishum de Ishta Kagufai. A wife is like your own body, Viragilba, and you're accustomed to her. It's not going to arouse improper thoughts. Veleke herhura. Umikamakam tzarchach zaras panim. You still need to turn around. Yeah, it has to be back to back. The panim lahade panim yavshad veleke herhura. Face to face, it's impossible. There won't be improper thoughts. What if the man turns away, but the woman is still facing him? In other words, they're not back to back. It's his back to her front. Even though her erva in the front is opposite his back, he could read the Shema. The shuv lekeher. It won't come to her. As long as his flesh is not touching her erva. What if she also wants to say Shema? Then she needs to turn around. However, here we're going to see an interesting chiddush. By stam two people, they cannot say Shema even back to back, unless there's a hefsek talis. Husband and wife, they could say Shema back to back, even without a hefsek talis. Even if their flesh is touching mutarim likrois, they're allowed to say the Shema. Sha'oiser, there are those who aser, that again the Mechaber says you're allowed to turn around even without a hefsek talis, even if their besarim are touching. Says the Mishna Berura, there are those who aser. What does it mean there are those who aser? Ratzulam b'loi hafsakas talis. Ulfi devreim tzarch ma'oid lizar b'zeh b'kriya shema shalmito v'berchas hamapel sheyeh b'neim hafsakas talis va'az afilu panim lahadei panim muter v'chanal. So like this. In Sivkot and Hey we said that according to the opinion Ishtay Kagufai, nevertheless you need Hachzaras Panim, but even you do not need Hefsek Talis. And we said that even Besaram Noigim Bezeh Mutaram Likrois. Now, he's saying that if it's panim lahadei panim, behefsek talis, it's mutter. Now, what does he mean that if they're facing each other, hafsakas talis would help? I guess that's referring to what we said in Sivkat and Gimel, that if they're panim, pneim zelazeh, it's mutter with hefsek talis. Okay, let's begin Siv Gimel. Im hayo yashin im banav. If you're sleeping with your children, ba'oidam ketanim, while they're still young, mutter likrois, it's permitted to say Shema, bechazaras panim, by turning away, beloya hefsakas talis, even without a hefsek talis. We said in Sif Aleph that if they're noigeya, you need a hefsek talis, even if they're back to back. If your children are young, you do not need hefsek talis. Let's see one Mishna Berura. In Banav. For children, everyone agrees that since you're accustomed with them, and you're familiar with them, they're like your own guf, and it won't lead to her. But face to face is asr. Pri chadash mekel, pri chadash is mekel even face to face. Vehivi raya, he brings a proof of say Ma'amar Mordechai Berk Yosef dachu rayasa. Umashma oid midivrei Ma'amar Mordechai da afilu nema de ein sach lachser panim. The Ma'amar Mordechai is masha that even if you're going to say that you don't have to turn around, al kal panim benoigea ervasai bebesaram oil hepach asr. Even if you say you don't have to turn around, but if your flesh is touching, if your erva is touching their flesh, or their erva is touching your flesh, it's asr. So in other words, here we're saying that if you sleep with your children while they're young, you could turn around without a hefsek talis. But face to face is asr. By face to face, we said by a regular person that it's asr beloy hafsakas talis afilu enam noigim. So the Pri Chadash is mekel, but not if they're noigeya, not if they're touching each other. Okay, we're going to hold it over here. We're going to try to finish this Siman tomorrow with your permission, okay? Have a good day, everyone. Bracha v'atzlacha. Kol tov.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.